United States have sent us a letter with measures that would come into effect unless there is a negotiated solution. So we will therefore also extend the suspension of our countermeasures till early August.
Something big just happened, and almost no one is prepared for the fallout. America's aggressive new tariffs have set off a trade war with the EU and Canada, triggering billion-dollar reprisals and forcing the world's supply chains into uncharted territory. Imagine you're an experienced engineer at Boeing's Seattle plant. One evening, you hear the administration is imposing 30 to 50% tariffs on goods from the EU, Mexico, and Canada. Within hours, the EU cancels a $43 billion Boeing order. Canada and the EU retaliate with $95 billion in counter-tariffs and quickly shift major deals to Airbus and other suppliers. Suddenly, familiar business partners back away. Next morning, the factory feels different. Workers quietly discuss possible layoffs, pay cuts, and worry about the next bonus or summer plans. It's not just Boeing suppliers. Cafeteria owners and small machine shops near the plant also get nervous as big clients look elsewhere. If cancellations and the move to Airbus continue, 15,000 to 18,000 jobs could disappear from aerospace hubs in Washington and Texas in the first year. With average monthly earnings at $5,500 per worker, these communities could lose $80 to $100 million in income monthly. Families with someone in aerospace may see their household budgets drop by $700 to $1,200 per month, forcing tough choices about groceries, mortgage, car payments, or tuition. In boardrooms at Ryanair, switching from Boeing to China's Comac jets is no longer out of the question. For the first time, European airlines are openly considering Chinese planes instead of American-made aircraft. This threatens the decades-old leadership of the FAA and the reputation of American aviation safety worldwide. Families in America's plane towns, proud to have relatives at Boeing, now worry about job security and long-term benefits. Skilled workers are left considering career changes if European airlines truly go Chinese. Outside the plants, local diners and gas stations notice fewer regulars as business slows. Should Ryanair and others make the switch to Comac, Boeing could lose at least 5,000 to 7,000 direct and indirect jobs in the U.S. over 2 years. The lost contract value could reach $8 to $10 billion, forcing thousands of families to cut back on savings, delay home purchases, or put off college plans for their children, while U.S. firms wait. Canada and the EU quickly use CETA for zero-tariff trade. Clean energy, rare earths, EV batteries all flow freely, bypassing the U.S. Many American suppliers are left out. U.S. contractors and engineers see deals shift to Canadian rivals. Projects are postponed. Salaries cut. Jobs lost. Opportunities in EVs and AI now head north. If this continues, U.S. sectors could lose 6,000 to 8,000 jobs in a year. Export contracts may drop $1,500 to $3,000 per month per company. Lost contracts could total $60 million per month across the sector. Across America, people talk about new EU trade deals with India, the Middle East, and Africa without U.S. involvement. Digital and green standards set the tone. Networks like EU, Canada, and China, India are rising, with the U.S. left out. Anxiety rises for families tied to multinational firms, export jobs, or the dollar. Investments and savings now feel less secure as America's central role fades. If this shift continues, U.S. capital inflows could fall $150 to $200 billion per year. Families may see $300 to $500 per month less in investment returns and bonuses, forcing new budget decisions as America risks being left behind.
The new spending law changes how Americans pay for education at every level. One provision affects school vouchers with a possible ripple effect on public school funding. Another targets large university endowments, bringing a new tax reality to higher education.
You might get a few $100s back for giving to charity, but you could also lose thousands if your child is aiming for a top university. Trump's new tax law is changing how we fund both education and our communities. The real question is, who stands to benefit and who could be left behind? Starting in 2027, the One Big Beautiful Bill introduces a dollar-for-dollar tax credit up to $1,700 a year for donations to K-12 private school scholarship programs. This replaces the old system of regular deductions. With no federal cap on the total credits available, some experts estimate the government could end up covering as much as $100 billion annually. For families with no children in private school, this means public school funding may take a hit, especially in programs supporting students with disabilities. For example, if a student needs an aide at $20 per hour, budget cuts might reduce that support, directly affecting the classroom learning experience. Also in 2020, universities with large endowments will face higher taxes under the new law. Schools holding more than $750,000 per student in endowment funds will pay a 4% tax. Those with over $2 million per student will pay 8%, a sharp increase from the current 1.4%. However, colleges with fewer than 3,000 tuition-paying students, like Amherst or Wellesley, are exempt no matter how large their endowment. For top universities like Harvard, with an endowment over $50 billion, the new law could cost $200 to $280 million a year, enough to fund hundreds of scholarships or entire research programs. Even schools like Rice University expect to pay more than $10 million annually, roughly the value of 100 full scholarships. To adapt, many universities have started freezing hiring, delaying raises, and slowing student enrollment growth. Families sending students to top-tier schools may notice tighter financial aid, fewer scholarships, and less generous tuition offsets. If you're planning for an Ivy League education, you might need to budget several $1,000s more per year than previous classes did. Beginning in 2026, the law also introduces a charitable deduction for non-itemizers up to $1,000 for individuals and $2,000 for couples. For the first time, over 90% of Americans who use the standard tax form will be eligible for this kind of deduction. That means if you normally give $500 to charity but don't itemize your taxes, you can still reduce your taxable income by $500 and possibly get $50 to $100 back at tax time. It's a practical way to reward everyday generosity. But wealthier donors and businesses face tighter limits. High-income individuals can only deduct up to 35% of their adjusted gross income AGI and must subtract 0.5% AGI from their donation total. For businesses, the reduction is 1% of AGI. Experts estimate this could reduce large-scale charitable giving by about $81 billion over the next decade. If you've noticed major donations from big companies or wealthy individuals to museums, arts programs, or research institutions, those contributions may become less frequent. This could leave some of those organizations needing to pause or revise plans if they cannot find replacement funding.
More Canadians come to America than tourists from any other country. Last year, Canadians made over 20 million visits to the U.S. and spent more than $20 billion here. But this year, many are not coming to America, as I saw firsthand on a recent trip to Vermont, right near the Canadian border.
Canadian visitors didn't say goodbye, they just quietly stopped coming. No more lines of weekend cars at the border. No more cheerful voices at the outlets and cafes. They left behind unused ski passes and a once thriving cross-border friendship that now feels a little strained. Back in 2024, over 20 million Canadian travelers crossed into the U.S., spending close to $19.8 billion. But by 2025, that number is sliding fast. In June alone, cross-border car traffic from Canada dropped 33%, marking the sixth straight month of decline. At a well-known ski resort near the Vermont border, 30 to 35% of seasonal passes from Canadian guests were never renewed. That's 1 out of every 3 visitors gone, and with them, income for local ski instructors, shuttle drivers, and small restaurants. If you've ever strolled through a small town near the border, places like Plattsburgh, NY or Darby Line, VT, you may already notice stores are quieter, cafes closing earlier, or fewer hands behind the counter. For local motel owners and diner staff who rely on guests from Toronto or Montreal, this isn't abstract, it's lost income day after day. The loss of Canadian visitors isn't just a footnote. It's playing out in real time at the register. In Jay Peak, Vermont, A resort that used to see over 3,000 Canadian season pass holders now has fewer than 1,500 renewals, slashing ticket revenue by more than $1.2 million year over year. Local hotels and eateries have shortened hours or closed 2 days a week just to stay afloat. At the St. Bernard de la Colle duty-free shop, once averaging 400 transactions a day, numbers have dropped to under 200, dragging revenue from over $100,000 per day in 2024 to under $55,000 now. One store owner put it plainly, "We're sitting on double the inventory because nothing's moving." Even Vermont Bruco, a local favorite with a loyal Canadian following, saw second quarter sales drop 38%. The reason? A case of their popular IPA that used to cost 25 Canadian dollars now sells for over 36. Thanks to import taxes, about an $8 hike per case. Many customers have shifted to Canadian brands like Molson or Bose, which are cheaper and untaxed. If you're a bartender, cook, or receptionist near the border, you've probably already felt the change: fewer shifts, fewer tips, and too many empty tables where Canadian guests used to sit. With cross-border travel in retreat, towns across the northern U.S. are stepping up efforts to reconnect with their neighbors to the north. In downtown Burlington, Vermont, the popular Church Street was temporarily renamed Canada Street for the month of July. Store signs, banners, and even menus now include French translations as a warm welcome. Shops like Maple Lane Boutique and diners like North Shore Diner are offering at par pricing, meaning Canadians can pay in Canadian dollars at a one exchange rate. That can save travelers 7% to 10% on purchases enough to turn a $50 lunch from nearly 70 Canadian dollars back down to face value. There's also a new initiative called Free Canada Day, rolling out in towns from New York to Michigan, offering free admission to local attractions, lodging discounts, and special perks for Canadians visiting on July 1st, their national holiday. Some hotels even promote deals like buy 2 nights, get 1 free for Canadians, a savings of $200 to $300 per trip. These gestures are more than symbolic. For many border towns that depend on Canadian travelers, from gas stations and grocery stores to motels and roadside diners, this is a matter of survival. If Canadian guests keep staying away, the winter ahead could be a tough one.
How can we find a way to support each other? And then in addition to that, find a way to get to new markets.
Did you know that the Ford you're driving or the dishwasher you're planning to buy next month might no longer be made in the U.S.? It didn't take a major blow from a foreign competitor. America is weakening its own manufacturing base as more and more major companies quietly move operations north, choosing Canada as their new home. In just the past 18 months, more than $7.2 billion in investment from major players like GM, Ford, Tesla, and Alcoa has quietly flowed into Canada. It's not about cheaper labor, it's about lower total costs. In Canada, industrial electricity runs around 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour, about 45% cheaper than in U.S. manufacturing states like Ohio or Michigan. Add to that, the faster approvals getting a factory built in Canada takes months, not years like it often does in the US, especially for industries like clean energy or battery production. One example, Honda is planning a 15 billion Canadian dollars, about 11 billion US dollars, electric vehicle and battery complex in Ontario, backed by major funding from both the Canadian federal and provincial governments. Earlier, Stellantis, which owns Chrysler, secured over 1 billion Canadian dollars for its battery plant in Windsor. So what does that mean for everyday Americans? It's simple. Jobs that might have landed in Michigan or Georgia are now heading to Canada. Each complex like Honda's can mean 3,000 to 4,000 jobs, gone from the US, not just factory jobs, but construction work, parts suppliers, and shipping and logistics roles. If you live in a town that's long relied on industry like Toledo, OH or Flint, MI losing a plant might mean fewer diners staying open, daycares shutting down early, or even local home prices falling because no one's moving in anymore. The U.S. decision to raise steel tariffs to 50% has already triggered a real spike in material costs. Right after President Trump's announcement, hot rolled coil HRC, a core material for many industries, jumped about 6%, or $240 per ton. Aluminum, used in everything from food packaging to cars and electronics, shot past $1,279 per ton. up over 20% since January. For automakers, that's painful. A pickup truck like the Ford F-150 or Chevy Silverado now costs nearly $5,700 more in materials alone without any extra bells or whistles. If you were planning to buy a truck for around $45,000, that price could easily cross $50,000. And it's not because the vehicle got better, it's just the taxes. And it's not just about price tags, it's about jobs. In places like Ohio, Michigan, and Georgia, factories are getting fewer orders because they can't compete with Canada's lower costs. Some Georgia plants have gone from 3 shifts to just 1. And reports show over 3,500 workers have either been furloughed or laid off in just the last 6 months. For the rest of us, it shows up in rising prices on anything that uses metal, from soda cans to fridges to washing machines. That $799 dishwasher you were eyeing. Next month, it might cost $850 to $875, simply because of tariffs and more expensive raw materials. While the U.S. wrestles with rising tariffs and shifting investment, Canada is stepping up fast, becoming North America's new high-tech hub. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec are now being called Battery Valley, with massive projects in EV batteries, clean energy, and electronic components taking root. Swedish firm Northvolt is investing $5.2 billion in a mega battery plant in Quebec, expected to create 3,000 to 6,000 skilled jobs. According to Economic Minister Pierre Fitzgibbon, they're tapping into Canada's low-cost hydroelectric grid and government incentives that include extended tax breaks and easier approval processes for key materials like nickel and lithium. Both crucial for battery manufacturing, Canada's strategy is about more than foreign money. They're building a fully domestic supply chain, from mining and refining to assembly and recycling. That gives them protection from fragile global supply lines and an edge when dealing with carbon regulations from the US and Europe. As companies shift north, skilled American workers, especially in tech, engineering, and battery systems, face fewer opportunities. And the price of American-made goods may keep rising if we end up importing parts from Canada at higher costs. So if you're wondering why job listings in your town are drying up, or why your next microwave is $40 more than the last one, you might just need to look a few hundred miles north.
With the looming threat of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs, a Buy Canadian movement has picked up across the country. You may have noticed it when you go into grocery stores or supply shops, a tag that tells you if the product you're about to pick up is made in Canada.
What if a simple change in consumer habits led to billions of dollars shifting hands between 2 close neighbors? If Canadian families suddenly stopped buying 6 everyday American products, would American companies even notice at first? Or would the real shock come months later as lost sales ripple through factories, small towns, and even online platforms? Imagine how daily routines in both countries might quietly transform if trusted brands slowly vanished from shopping carts. For many years, Americans saw Canada as a reliable partner in trade and daily life. But recently, as U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, energy, and autos reached new highs, Canadians have responded in a quietly powerful way. Not with protests, but by simply turning away from certain U.S. products. 6 brands stand out: peanut butter, Harley-Davidson motorcycles, Amazon, Netflix, Walmart house brands, and cars from Ford and GM. This is no longer just an economic move. It has become a cultural statement. We don't support a nation that punishes us. This shift began in the spring of 2025, and by summer, the effect was visible in store aisles across Ontario and British Columbia. For American workers, especially those in manufacturing and retail, each unsold jar or canceled order represents a lost hour of work. If the boycott continues, annual losses for you side. Companies could exceed $2 billion USD, putting pressure on jobs from the factory floor to logistics and marketing teams. Peanut butter, once a pantry staple, tells a striking story. Sales of Jif and Skippy, 2 iconic American brands, dropped 34% in just 1 quarter across Canada. Supermarkets have quickly replaced them with local alternatives like Kraft Canada and Nuts to You. Even Walmart, the retail giant, has found its U.S.-made goods left untouched. As Canadian shoppers favor local products or brands from other countries, the message is clear for American producers and investors. Brand loyalty can vanish quickly when national pride is at stake. The ripple effect extends to farmers supplying peanuts, workers in packaging plants, and truck drivers moving goods north. If this trend continues, the U.S. peanut industry alone could see export revenues shrink by up to 150 million USD per year. Amazon's Canadian operation took a direct hit. In early July 2025, Amazon suspended services in Quebec, leading to around 700 job losses. While some customers shifted to Canadian platforms or European tech providers, the trust gap grew. Netflix, another household name, also saw subscription numbers fall as families questioned supporting a U.S. brand in times of economic tension. The tech sector, often seen as immune to politics, is now facing unexpected headwinds. Investors and workers from software developers to warehouse staff could see income growth stall. Projections suggest U.S. e-commerce and streaming exports to Canada may drop by up to 500 million USD this year if consumer confidence does not rebound. Perhaps the most visible shift is in the auto market. After Canada imposed a 25% tariff on U.S. made cars in response to the Trump administration's moves, showroom traffic for Ford and GM sharply declined. Online searches for these brands in Canada plummeted, while orders were canceled and lots stood empty. Canadian drivers quickly switched to Korean and Japanese models like Hyundai, Toyota, and Honda. For small-town dealerships in Michigan and Ohio, every unsold car means tighter budgets and fewer jobs. Industry forecasts indicate U.S. auto exports to Canada could fall by over $2 billion USD in 2025, a sobering figure for anyone whose paycheck depends on cross-border sales.
Now, according to the U.S. Travel Association, even a 10% drop in Canadian tourists could cost the U.S. more than $2 billion in spending and threaten 140,000 jobs.
You walk into an airport that once buzzed with crowds and excitement. Now, you find rows of empty seats, silent hallways, and closed check-in counters. Sounds dramatic. This is the new reality at America's busiest airports. As airlines and travelers quietly turn away from the United States, there was a time when America's biggest airports bustled. Tourists rushing, constant boarding calls, but since early 2025, over 10 major airlines, including Singapore Airlines, Lufthansa, Emirates, Air France, Play Airlines have quietly cut flights to the U.S. without major announcements. Now, silence lingers at O'Hare, LAX, and JFK, emptier waiting areas, fewer staff at check-in, and departure boards crowded with canceled routes. In cities like Chicago and New York, the numbers start to feel real. With 85,000 jobs at risk, families are rethinking how to pay the mortgage, keep up with college savings, or cover medical expenses for aging parents. This isn't just about a drop in tourism. It's a wave shaking the foundations of daily life, sometimes leaving the dinner table quieter, and plans for the future more uncertain. With job losses and shrinking incomes, an average family may have to cut $100 from the monthly grocery budget, often buying less fresh meat, milk, or produce. Multiply that by 85,000 workers. And local retailers and food suppliers feel the ripple, making entire cities more cautious. Higher landing fees, complicated visa procedures, and frosty welcomes at border checkpoints have made even the dream of coming to America less certain. These days, even a pricey business class ticket doesn't guarantee easy entry. Every shift cut, every lost dollar, weighs heavier when there are bills to pay and kids asking for new shoes. With fewer hotel guests, staff see their hours cut sometimes by as much as 6 hours per week. That's $240 a month, money that once covered groceries, summer camps, or a weekend meal to unwind from the stress. If this continues, hotel and restaurant workers may need to tighten their budgets even further. Shopping for fresh meat, fish, and vegetables might shrink by up to 20%. That's $50 to $100 less per month for every family working in these industries. Not long ago, travelers from Scandinavia, Korea, the UK, and France would visit America touring colleges, attending conferences, or seeking a new kind of summer. Now, they're picking Canada or Japan, which seem more open and welcoming. With everyday essentials, sales expected to drop by $60 million this year. Shop owners face tough choices. Cut staff hours, reduce orders, or explain slimmer margins to employees. Shelves aren't empty, but aisles often are, making it hard to plan or invest. As international visitors vanish, local milk sales could drop 15 to 20% from last year. Store owners may lose $1,000 to $2,000 in monthly revenue, affecting fresh product quality and supply, and possibly raising prices if supply chains struggle. In past years, city lights in places like New York or Miami burned bright, thanks to international visitors renting short-term apartments, packing coffee shops, bringing energy to every corner. Now, as British Airways, Lufthansa, and Jetstar all reduce flights, 1.5 million visits simply vanish. Short-term apartment rents in former gateways to America are dropping by an average of $200 per month. For tenants, it sounds like a win. But for landlords who relied on that income to pay debt or cover medical bills, it's nearly $50 million in lost revenue. Quietly, faith in the American dream slips a little more, not just in the eyes of the world, but even for those who once thought they'd finally found stability.
And with President Trump, what he said, he's offended them. I can understand tariffs. I don't really understand them, what's going to happen with all this, but it's got the world kind of going crazy right now.
Milk isn't just milk anymore, it's a luxury. Just days after the U.S. imposed a 35% tariff on Canadian goods, life in border towns like Point Roberts and Darby Line has changed overnight. Simple routines, from grabbing groceries to visiting neighbors, have become fraught with new challenges as tariffs ripple through every breakfast table. Border towns like Point Roberts, WI, and Darby Line, VT, once thrived on easy routines, families and retirees crossing for groceries, especially milk, as casually as attending church. But a new 35% federal tariff on Canadian goods has erased that way of life almost overnight. Local gas stations sit empty, diners miss Canadian regulars, and clinics are quieter as cross-border visits vanish. In Point Roberts, where 80% of business depends on Canadians, each day brings a tough question: how to survive when regulars are gone? Some shopkeepers now seriously wonder if joining Canada is their only hope, a joke turned real. Milk, once a simple staple, now stands as a symbol. Its price may soon jump $1.5 to $2 a gallon, turning a quick grocery run into a budgeting challenge. For these towns, trade policy now hits home right down to breakfast. There's a certain pride in working at Niagara Falls, New York, a place that once welcomed the world. For many middle-aged locals running restaurants or small hotels, tourism was more than a paycheck. It was a calling. Now, with Canadian flights down nearly 75%, empty dining rooms and silent hotel lobbies are common. Hotels, spas, and casinos have lost tens of millions. Some who managed front desks or kitchens now clean rooms, scraping by on less than the $1,200 average rent. For many couples, dinner talk isn't about dreams, but how to pay next month's bills. As visitors vanish, so do jobs. By summer's end, over 800 full-time hospitality jobs could disappear, meaning fewer families can feel secure at home. When guests leave, a piece of the town's spirit goes with them. Insults to Mary, Michigan, border traffic is down 44%. For middle-aged families and retirees, the impact is clear. It shows up in higher prices at hardware stores. Lumber, once brought over regularly, is now rarer and pricier than ever. Local shops and restaurants have lost tens of millions. In Blaine, Washington, retail sales have dropped 30% in 3 weeks, wiping $25 million from the economy. As budgets tighten, schools and farmers markets cut back, and senior services fight to stay open, families start to wonder if it's time to leave. It's more than just lumber. When those prices rise, repairs, decks, and roofs all cost more, without change. The average household could pay $400 extra each month for groceries and supplies, a hit hard to handle for any family, especially those on fixed incomes. A question of trust and belonging. In places like Darby Line and Point Roberts, the border crisis is more than lost business. It's losing a sense of home. Neighbors who once celebrated together and shared meals are now separated, with border crossings from Canada down 23% from last year, leaving a deep ache. For many middle-aged locals, it's not just fewer customers or a quieter Main Street. It's about identity and belonging in a place that felt like ours. Distant federal decisions are eroding routines that once felt solid. If this continues, over 2,000 families may leave towns they helped build, giving up not just homes, but a whole way of life. The question remains, when community ties fray, what does it mean to be at home?